always tricky being the graveyard shift. Please don't leave, people. But we're tackling a big theme now, and three pretty weighty topics. So, optimism in European tech, the impact of geopolitical turbulence in Europe, and where can Europe win over the next 10 years? And we've got some pretty fantastic panelists to talk to those topics. So I'm going to welcome to the stage Matt Miller, former partner at Sequoia, who recently launched his new firm, Evantic, Julia Hawkins, partner at LocalGlobe, and Ben Macon-Cooney, who is chief policy strategist at the Tony Blair Institute. So we just shared our research into the growing number of new rocket ships in Europe and the new generation of European founders who were on the panel earlier and talking to how they're keeping pace in the US. Do you guys share the excitement about Europe right now and the sense that there's something kind of new afoot? I'm hoping you're going to say yes, otherwise this is going to end on a sour note.
100%.
Absolutely.
Is this on?
Yeah, I think so. Who wants to take it first? Maybe Matt and Julia?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there's a renewed energy in Europe in the AI wave. I think there was a lot of talk about Europe not being AI relevant, and here we have some amazing scaling AI companies right here in London. Chris, who we just saw, we also have 11 Labs, we have Synthesia, we have some really killer AI companies growing here. We have this moment in time where we've kind of shifted from a wave of technology around SaaS and mobile, which was really go-to-market dominated, to a wave of technology in AI, which is technology dominated, where we in Europe have a better advantage because of the strength of our academic institutions and our education programs. We're seeing more and more companies get started. We're seeing more and more high-growth companies scale. You know, Lovable was here today, and Eden is another example of a super high-growth company we have here in Europe. And so I think it's a great time, and it's a great time to be here and to be investing and working and building, and it's a great place to be.
I guess I would say I 100% share the excitement about AI, but I'm going to say something that may be controversial, or I hope that you don't look back and think that I'm smoking crack. But really, I just want to say that I believe that the next wave of European companies that will go on to become super impactful are the science and engineering-led companies. I think that this wave will really be impactful for Europe. And there is a defining founder that you may not know in this wave that I think you will do in the next couple of months, and his name is James Stackholm. And I want to mention him because of this fantastic Antler program and the people who are in this audience, because I think he's representative of the wave. So he is right now 23. I met him when he was 17. He'd become obsessed with understanding how the brain works following a death, a tragedy in his family. He went on to become a Teal Fellow when he was 20, and at 23, he's built an amazing multidisciplinary team right here in London. And what the company does is essentially tries to decode and provide a neuromonitor, neurosignals from the brain entirely non-invasively. And this is really redefining a standard of care, which is based on a scientific and an engineering breakthrough. And in addition to that, he now has clinical data, he's got commercial traction. And I think the combination of all of this is you're just thinking, holy smokes. And this is an example of a European company. So my prediction is actually that, Harry Stubbings' podcast, whom we all love to listen to, right now, it's wall-to-wall AI, but I think in 10 years' time, it's going to be back-to-back science-based founders.
It's interesting, Ben, obviously you're, if it wasn't obvious with your suit, you're bringing a slightly different perspective to this conversation. What's your...
I apologise for being so horribly overdressed for a tech conference.
I like it, it's so smart.
I have been in Westminster all day. Look, I am so much more optimistic than I was, even 2 years ago about where we've been trending. And, I sometimes still have the personal reflection around this that, 20 years ago when I graduated, coming out, your options were finance, government, consultancy. We didn't have any of that sort of muscle memory within the UK ecosystem. And so, you could tell which option I chose at that point. But I think we are seeing much more opportunity in this space. But I think from my perspective as well, I don't just look at it from the sort of a few awesome companies growing. I think there is both this profound window of vulnerability right now in Europe, but there's also a window of opportunity, because if you look around the world today, we say like UK might be vying for third place in the AI race. We've got DeepMind was hosted here. We've got some really cool companies. Great, but we are so far behind where the US and China are on this, and I think it's basically a national mission for both the UK and for Europe to stop sort of admiring the problem of low growth and low productivity, and sort of saying tech's still this sort of geeky side issue, when it's actually probably the central issue for any society to have any kind of form of economic and state power in the near future. So I think it's one that government obviously needs to give much more attention to and stop treating as this sort of little bit on the side. And second is that simultaneously you need the sector to work a lot more collaboratively with the government to work out the preconditions for that success for both the nation state and the sector itself.
So you kind of alluded to a sense of urgency in Europe, and maybe in the UK in particular, that if we don't act now, we're going to miss out on a moment. Do you guys think that's valid?
I got to say I disagree. As an American that's moved here to invest in great companies in Europe, but also in the US and Israel, I think that we are in the moment, and we do have great things that are happening here. And you can make this argument that, well, okay, we're behind. We're just significantly a smaller country in the United Kingdom. So like, it's just to say that we're the same page as China and the United States, it's just, we can't. It's just like we're just a significantly smaller nation. But there's amazing things happening here nonetheless, and great people come here to get their educations. And I think that what we need to do is continue to be a magnet for talent, and make it easy for talent to come here, to be here, to live here, because London is the best place. Europe is an amazing place to live, to be educated, and to build. London is arguably the best place in Europe to do that, even though it's technically not part of Europe, but in this region of the world, it's the best place. And the cards could have gone a little bit differently, and instead of it being OpenAI, it could have been DeepMind. Yeah. But the way that the cards played out, it ended up that DeepMind went to Google. The Google AI team, research, energy is primarily here in the United Kingdom. So we can sit and say we're behind, but we also have one of the biggest tech companies in the world, chief AI strategy, is being driven from here in the United Kingdom. And I think that is awesome. And that's like a point that we just like to miss, because it's owned by a company that's been primarily domiciled in the United States. We also have companies here, and I think like the growth is a signal of the success. Like, we have companies here that are growing very rapidly now, that are being built here, founded here, funded here. And that's a huge thing. There's not many places other than San Francisco in the United States that have that. And so you can say, well, we're behind the United States. We're behind San Francisco. We're not behind Atlanta, Georgia, or Dallas, Texas, or New York City. We're better than all of these other cities in the United States here in London. We have better AI companies than anywhere else in the United States other than San Francisco. And so I think like this is just, you have to reframe how you think about it. And I feel like oftentimes we're just so down on the European opportunity. The things in Europe are hard. We have to seize this moment. We just have to fucking go. We have to get out of our own way, and we just have to build. And so I'm building a new fund here in Europe, and everybody always wants to come to me and talk to me about like, Matt, why did you choose to build a European fund? I'm not building a fucking European fund. Nobody in the United States says I'm building an American fund. I'm building a fund. I'm going to go make money. I'm building a fund. We're going to go make money. We're going to invest in great things, whether they're in the UK, whether they're in France, whether they're in Germany, whether they're in Israel, whether they're in the United States. And I think we just have to get out of our minds. It's like we're at a less of a playing field because we're in Europe. We're in an amazing playing field. We have a different set of advantages and a different set of weaknesses than our peers in San Francisco or other places, but we have a lot of great things to our advantage, and we should play with those things and just go and just build and just run, because the opportunity is here. And I think that the AI wave is going to be significantly larger than the SaaS wave, than the mobile wave, than the other waves of technology we've seen. And it's a chance to build generational companies and chance to do really incredible things and make a lot of money and jobs and talent for this ecosystem.
I'm really glad you mentioned the UK and bigged up the UK, because I actually forgot to say that I'm one of the Antler partners in the UK, and normally that's my role to big up the UK. So thank you for doing that. I guess if we look at what's happening in other parts of the world, things are pretty turbulent: tariffs, populism, and wars. Does this create opportunities for Europe and the UK in particular, or is kind of uncertainty just generally a bad thing for starting and scaling a company?
I mean, I would like to say that actually turbulent times, maybe if it's controversial, actually lead to huge amounts of innovation and breakthroughs. I mean, even when you look at, historically speaking, the Cold War was actually the result, actually resulted in huge amounts of innovation that came out of it. We had the space race, we had nuclear energy, also supersonic travel came at that time. And so I would say that even though right now there is a ton of turbulence, actually even just looking at our health systems, the fact that 50% of cancer diagnosis happens in A&E for certain cancers, that's just diabolical. And founders who actually don't necessarily emanate from the healthcare system, founders like Daniel Ek, second-time founders, are going after to solve this problem. And so I think that now what is becoming evident is obviously that technology has caught up, and that just means that AI plus advancements in material science, biochemistry, et cetera, just means that founders are able to see solutions to problems that actually previously wasn't possible. Cusp is actually a very good example. They announced a $100 million round just yesterday, and Chad is a prime example of this type of founder. So yeah, as much as it could be controversial, I also think it leads to founders stepping up and building companies that are actually creating the future that we're all going to live in.
And Ben, what blind spots do you think European governments have when it comes to supporting founders? And what do you think they can do to kind of drive more innovation?
So I think one of them, you've got both sort of atmospherics of policy versus actual practical parts, right? Which is, I think the atmospherics part still is that the culture of startups is still something that is building, and I think needs more sort of recognition. DeepMind, to Matt's point, actually Demis has become to some degree sort of a champion of industry in the UK, but still, if you asked most people, it would be Richard Branson and Alan Sugar. It would not be, in the same way that we've got some of those figures that are central to our kind of public forum and discussion. I think that sort of veneration of culture, so people are encouraged into it, is actually, a good part of politics. I think that's sort of the signal side. But then you've also then got the very practical side of policy. And we've had lots of sort of strategies. You've had the Draghi report in Europe again diagnosing lots of the problem, but that has to very quickly turn into sort of delivery and practical application. I don't think it's, from my perspective, to Matt's point on let's get on and build, I do think sometimes say the private sector whinges a little bit too much and doesn't get into the arena, but there is also some really bad policy still in Europe around this. In the UK, some of the wealth stuff and non-doms has not been great for capital flight, and wealth creation. There are things on IPOs and listings, on actual how you, which is not encouraging companies to necessarily list in the UK, albeit it's a broader trend of companies remaining private for a longer time as well as just some of the sort of the nuts and bolts of just, again, government beginning to also act as a procurer in places as well. There's a big window of opportunity, I think, around Europe right now, particularly in defence and security, where the sort of the geopolitical risk has shifted more thinking into sort of sovereignty and building your own systems. That to some degree, I think you still want to partner with your allies and build the best and buy the best technology, but at the same time, governments will want to be having some sense of ownership over their sort of future. And I think, AI in particular and defence around that is where governments should be looking to play a much more active role in pulling through the system as well.
So you've touched obviously on defence, and we talked about AI. Which other sectors is Europe really leading in, and what does it have a unique advantage in? Julia, you talked about healthcare.
Well, I think it's really just deep tech and more broadly. I think that's a segment where Europe is really well placed to win. I think science-based, multidisciplinary teams. We've got companies like Isomorphic Labs, Helsing that you spoke about, BioNTech, Neko, Quantum, all examples of this cohort of companies. And I think, you know, there's some myths around them. I think they are not too slow. They are not too risky. It's not harder to exit them than soft tech companies. I think what is different about them is that they need more and slightly different capital, and I think that creates, a challenge and an opportunity for investors. So venture investors need to be able to collaborate with both with credit, with grants, with philanthropy, and I think that's where we get this really amazing support system, which needs to come together for this cohort of companies.
You also remind me, I got my Neko health scan in the morning tomorrow, actually. So it's
Good luck.
Great company, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the advantages we have is, number one, this is the best place to live in the world. And everybody wants to come here, everybody wants to live here, which leads to a lot of other problems. But it's the best place to live in the world. And I mean, you know, even if you compare this, but many people here who always look at wince when I say that, and they say, oh, wouldn't we want to live back in California with the sunshine? But I mean, the homelessness, the mental health crisis, the gun violence, the lack of infrastructure, the poor transportation networks, the lack of education, the poor education, like, this is the best place to live in the world, period. And two, we have the best education system available to us, which creates great talent, which creates these opportunities in deep technology and in AI. And we just have to figure out how best to take advantage of that. And that's the way we should win. You know, I hear a lot about worrying about listings. Where are we going to get the listings? Who cares about getting the listings? The world's public markets are out of New York City. That's not going to change anytime soon. Who cares? We can list in New York City. It's no big deal. That doesn't make us great or not great. What makes us great is when great people choose to live here, build here, and contribute to the society here. And we have the right ingredients. We just need to be, from a policy perspective, more open on integration, more friendly on tax policy, to enable the right people to be here, to stay here, and to build, and encourage it and recognize it. In the United States, in Texas, people don't know who Sam Altman is either. You know, so they wouldn't know a Demis Hassabis outside of the San Francisco or the New York, Washington, D.C. corridors the same way. So it's like, it's not surprising to me that Richard Branson is the figure here. Like, it will come with time as the companies here have more time to be more successful, but we just have to create the right ingredients for people to be here, stay here, and contribute here.
And I think that, just to add to that, I mean, I think that's obviously what Silicon Valley did so incredibly well. It became the talent magnet, the best place to come and build a company. If you're European, if you're Chinese, if you're Indian, wherever you may be from. And I think exactly that we need to replicate it. We're already seeing it happen, actually. And I think Trump will end up being one of the best recruiters for Europe. I think, you know, just an example, he canceled $8 billion worth of space observation budget, and as a direct consequence of that, one of our space companies saw an influx of literally hundreds of NASA engineers, and so I think that is, you know, case in point that we are with the right environment. I think need to create a place where they can actually come and be integrated and find work and find the opportunities that enable them to generate generational wealth.
I can't quite believe we've only got 1.5 minutes left. Don't quite know how that happened. But for all the VCs and the founders and the LPs in the room, if we look ahead to 2035, what will we regret not doing today? Maybe each of you say a brief thing. Like, what should we do now? Or what should we do now? What will we regret not doing?
Look, I think the one regret we may have in 2035 is, you know, looking at the number of NVIDIAs that were not built in Europe. And what I mean by that is we need to apply the right lens for really supporting and evaluating founders at this very inception stages. And so I think there is, you know, is there a Jensen, is there an Elon here in Europe that's not building at the scale that they otherwise could be? And if that's one of you, then obviously I'd love to speak to you.
I'll give an extremely practical example then, because I think you can give a... I think particularly on the biotech side, there is a massive opportunity to expand on some of the amazing work that the UK Biobank did with the genomics data and creating some really high-value data assets for healthcare. I think that is a piece of work that is going on in the government right now with the data trust, but I think could be just a really strong model of how governments can create competitive data assets on which the private sector can build on as public goods. And I think that's not something that's in the government's mentality in the broad sense, but we've seen some really high returns on such types of activity previously.
I think because we live in such a great place and we have such a great setup here in Europe, we have an inclination to be a little less risk-seeking than other parts of the world. And I think if in 10 years, each of us is individually asking ourselves, what did we miss? It's we took a little less risk than we'd like to. And so I think like the one thing that I would say that is different from Europe is we take less risk. We should lean into taking more risk. And if each of us does that, then we'll have a better 2035 than we would otherwise.
Great note to end on. Thank you so much, wonderful panelists.